I like the ephemeral thing about theatre. Every performance is like a ghost. It's there and then it's gone. Welcome to Teacup For One. My name is Halloween Matt, and I have 2 degrees, and welcome to another episode of Grim Grinning Ghost Stories. Today's episode is extra special because I will be sharing my personal true ghost encounter. But that will come in due time. Like so many others, my ghostly encounter took place in a theater. Theaters are notoriously haunted buildings, and so in the spirit of Grim Grinning Ghost Stories, today's episode is dedicated to the Haunted Mansion's grandest diva, the opera singing ghost. The opera ghosts are among the final spirits encountered in the attraction, and although their appearance is brief, it is filled with detail, history, and a number of Marc Davis-inspired sight gags. Marc Davis was one of the head Imagineers in charge of bringing Disney's Haunted Mansion to death, and famously pushed to have the attraction filled with darkly comic quirk. This was the same person who gave the Jungle Cruise its first dose of tongue-in-cheek humor, and you can see his unique brand of cleverness at play in the opera ghost sequence. First, we have our 2 singing spirits, acting as the phantoms of the opera. Literally. Next, we have a knight in shining armor off to the side, watching the show, so we are literally treated to a night at the opera. And finally, there are rumors that the female opera singer is the physical embodiment of that age-old saying,
"It ain't over till the fat lady sings."
And appropriately enough, she is one of the last spirits we see before exiting the graveyard and making our way off of the attraction. But before we talk about the legacy of theater ghosts, and before I share my personal horrifying ghost story, I want to take a moment to address why the opera singing ghost is the perfect finale to the Haunted Mansion. There is no image associated with the opera more iconic than that of the Viking woman singing. She's probably who you imagine when you think of operatic performers. She is definitely who you imagine when you hear that old turn of phrase, "It ain't over till the lady sings." But little known fact, in a lot of ways, this lady represents death. But where did that come from? Who is this lady, and why do we have to wait for her to sing before it's over? To put it simply, this lady is Brünnhilde, one of the featured roles in Wagner's Ring Cycle. The Ring Cycle is an epic opera about Norse gods battling for a ring of power, which eventually brings about the end of the world. Based on my labor-intensive Wikipedia research, it's basically Lord of the Rings played out by the cast of Thor Ragnarok. And it's also 17 hours long. 17 hours long! Brünnhilde sings a 20-minute death scene at the end of Part 4, Scene 3. And at the end of her 20-minute long song about killing herself, she throws herself into a fire. Shortly after that, all of the gods perish and Valhalla ends, and then the opera is over. So quite literally, it is all over when Brünnhilde sings. Brünnhilde's life is over, Valhalla is over, the world is over. I think I didn't read that far into the Wikipedia page, but most importantly, the 17-hour-long opera is over. And that is why I think she makes for the perfect representation of the theater ghost. She takes 20 minutes to sing herself to death. It doesn't get more dramatic than that. Because here's the thing. Theater ghosts are traditionally a little bit more dramatic than your standard run-of-the-mill haunted house ghosts. Go away. And I personally think that's because theater people like to indulge them. The theater is an industry heavily influenced by superstition and tradition. Traditions that include things like, don't say Macbeth, don't whistle backstage, don't say good luck, say break a leg instead. And most importantly, always respect the ghosts. When it comes to theater traditions, many of them have practical intentions that have been over-embellished into something supernatural. There is a tradition of leaving one illuminated light on the stage after everyone has left the space. It's known as the ghost light. Some say the light is left on to scare away the ghosts. Others say that it's left on so that the ghosts can put on a show of their own while the theater is empty. Others say the light is there so that the first person back into the theater doesn't fall off the stage and break their leg. Whatever the logic, even the most skeptical theater practitioners will observe these traditions because when it comes to live performances, you don't want to take any chances. But traditions and superstitions aside, some of the most allegedly haunted buildings in the world are theaters, which makes sense. Theaters are usually older buildings, steeped in history, that housed countless generations of passionate people, most of which died without fulfilling their life purpose. You know, actors. And I'm no expert, but those seem like all the ingredients for a haunting to me. And in doing research for this video, I was pleasantly surprised to discover that one of the most haunted theaters in the world is a Disney theater. The New Amsterdam Theater on 42nd Street in New York City was built in 1902 and was home to the famous Ziegfeld Follies for over 10 years. During the 20th century, it went from being a performance space to a movie theater to an out-of-commission building, until the 1990s when it was leased by Walt Disney Theatrical to be their flagship space. The New Amsterdam Theater was home to the original Broadway productions of The Lion King, Mary Poppins, Aladdin, and it is one of the most haunted buildings on Broadway. This is an extra special haunting because we actually know who the ghost is. The New Amsterdam Theater is haunted by the ghost of silent film star Olive Thomas. Olive Thomas began her career in New York City, performing at the New Amsterdam Theater as one of the Ziegfeld Follies, and she quickly became a fan favorite. Just over 1 year later, she eloped with Jack Pickford, the younger brother of silent film legend Mary Pickford, and the two of them moved to California, where Olive began her career on screen. By all reports, Olive and Jack had a loving but rocky relationship. Aside from the fact that Mary Pickford and the rest of Jack's family didn't approve of the marriage, Olive and Jack had a reputation for being wild partiers, and that reputation fueled rumors surrounding Olive's eventual early death. In 1920, the couple traveled to Paris, and while there, Olive accidentally ingested a lethal amount of mercury chloride that Jack had been using to treat sores he had developed from syphilis. She died 5 days later, and the rumor mill began stirring. Some said it was murder, some said it was suicide, but the official ruling was that it was an accident. However, shortly after her death, stagehands at the New Amsterdam Theater claimed they saw Olive walking around backstage, holding a bottle of blue pills. Sometimes, she would even speak to them. Now, the sightings died down after the theater started to go into decline, but once Disney moved into the space in the 1990s, the sightings started again. One of the first sightings was from a security guard who claimed to see a woman crossing the stage in the middle of the night when he knew the theater was empty. She just blew him a kiss and went on her way. Others who've worked in the theater have reported hearing mysterious tap dancing and seeing disembodied phantom feet going up and down the stairs backstage. But don't worry, Disney is respecting their ghost. The head of Walt Disney Theatrical has made a point of respecting Olive's presence in the theater. He has her photo put up at every entrance and exit in the space so that people coming in and out of the theater can say hello to Olive. In fact, I don't know this for sure, but I almost think it's a necessity that people who work at the theater have to say hello to Olive when they come in and out of the space. Kind of like that ghost on Pirates of the Caribbean. And rumor has it that they've taken to only hiring female overnight guards because Olive will only appear to men. From the sounds of it, Olive is the perfect ghost for a Disney theater. She's a generally positive spirit that hasn't shown any signs of malicious intent, but that doesn't mean that Olive doesn't have a sassy side. One of my favorite stories that I came across when I was looking into Olive encounters is relatively recent and dates back only to 2012. Back in 2012, some Disney employees were in the offices of the New Amsterdam Theater discussing one of the big Oscar-contending films for that year, The Artist, which is a silent film all about the silent film industry of the early 1900s. Now, they got to talking about the silent film industry, and someone mentioned that Mary Pickford was the greatest star of that generation. And at the mere mention of Mary Pickford's name and legacy, a stack of DVDs went flying across the room. And reportedly, they didn't fall. They moved as though someone forcibly pushed them or threw them across the space. And remember, this happened at the mention of Mary Pickford, who was Olive's sister-in-law. Her disapproving sister-in-law. Now, I think the reason I find this story extra fascinating is because of how closely it ties to my ghostly encounter. Yes, the time has come. And honestly, I should not have saved my ghost story for the end because it's truthfully pretty tame compared to all the other ghost stories that we've heard during this series. But here it is. The year was 2015. I used to work at a dinner theater in Niagara Falls, Ontario, and holiday season of 2015, I was directing the theater's Christmas show. We were just over a week away from opening the show when our lighting designer quit, and suddenly it fell to me to have to learn how to program the lights so that we would have lights before the show opened. That was added to my list of responsibilities that I was set to take care of after hours once our rehearsals had wrapped up. The theater brought in a former employee to teach me how to use the lighting equipment and how to program the lighting board. Once our lesson wrapped up, it was around 10 p.m. We were the only two people left in the theater, and just as he was about to leave, he turned to me and said, "Matt, don't forget to have music on while you're working." And I said, "Oh, of course, that'll be fun." And he said, "Yes, it will be fun, but also to help you tune out the ghosts." Which is honestly the worst thing that anyone can say to somebody when they're about to abandon them and leave them alone in a theater. Now, for context, this theater was located on Lundy's Lane, which was the site of one of the biggest battles during the War of 1812. In addition, this theater specifically had been around for just over 20 years. They had seen numerous performers come in and go out, and over the course of its lifetime, some of those performers had passed away. So if there was any theater in Niagara Falls that was going to be haunted, it was going to be this one. Now, I've been working at the theater for a few years at this point, and I had heard my fair share of ghost stories. I had coworkers who reported that they felt a presence, other coworkers who said that they saw a presence, other coworkers who said that they saw fully formed figures walking in and out of walls and rooms, and like those stories are a lot of fun to hear until you find yourself alone in the space where apparently all of those things happened. Now, I should also mention that there was a massive windstorm happening this night. So, I was in a log cabin made of wood. The wood combined with the wind meant that there were a lot of naturally occurring sounds that were filling the space constantly. Yeah, there was like a lot of creaky, creaky, and a lot of bang, bang. And the circumstances were ripe for my imagination to go into overdrive. And I knew that. I knew that I was in a setting where any small occurrence could very easily be misconstrued as a ghostly encounter. But I also knew that I was directing a show that didn't have a lighting designer, that had absolutely no lights programmed, that was opening in just over a week. So I couldn't let any misconstrued maybe ghosts stop me from getting the job done. Now, let me paint a picture for you about this space. I was programming lights from the definitely not up to code lighting booth, which was essentially like a little treehouse perch that was elevated 15 feet above the audience level. Now, from that perch, I was able to see the entirety of the theater, from stage to audience space to the back of the house where we had the bar. So our bartender had a reusable Starbucks cup, which for the purposes of this dramatic recreation will be played by this live-action Lion King Cineplex cup. At the end of her shift, our bartender would always take this reusable Starbucks cup, which she drank water from throughout the duration of her shift, and she would rinse it out and leave it in the center of the bar, which is where it was, at probably 11 o'clock, midnight, when I was programming lights. Now, this reusable Starbucks cup was in the middle of the bar. It was sitting pretty, free from anything that could have possibly fallen on it, grazed it, or otherwise made physical contact with it. But then, while I'm plugging away, making all my pretty lights, out of my peripheral, I noticed the Starbucks cup do this. the Starbucks cup was flung across the room. And like it didn't fall, there was nothing around the Starbucks cup, because I did investigate later, that could have otherwise fallen on it or made it move. It wasn't just like it flung. The Starbucks cup flung across the room like someone threw it, pushed it, or something. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I got the bleep out of there. So that's my story. Nothing special. Just a run-of-the-mill ghost throwing a cup at me. Now, do I wish that I had a cooler theater ghost story like the ones that my coworkers told me about seeing a physical figure passing through walls? No, absolutely not. I am more than content with my, little hands-off ghostly encounter. It's enough for one lifetime. So, do I have reasonable doubt? Of course I do. A moving cup does not always mean ghost. I don't know what else it could mean, but it doesn't always mean ghost. I'm aware that I was stressed out and I was sleep deprived, and I was just so focused on making sure that this show was ready to open in time. And of course, all of those things could have just come together into me overreacting to the smallest little thing. But those are actually the circumstances that make me think it was one of the theater ghosts, because I was so stressed out and I was close to burning myself out to get this show open on time that I was depriving myself of sleep, I wasn't giving myself adequate rest, and I kind of would like to think that the theater ghosts were looking out for me and wanted to scare me just enough to make sure that I got home and slept for more than 4 hours. You know, if these theater ghosts were anything like the people that worked at this theater, they would have liked having fun, they would have liked scaring their friends a little bit, but at their heart, they would have been looking out for what was best for their coworkers to make sure that the best show possible happened. But it's also entirely possible they were trying to freak me out. Maybe both. Who knows? Anyway, friends, that is my story. And this concludes yet another episode of Teacup For One. Now let me know in the comment section down below. Have you ever had a ghostly encounter of your own? And what was that like for you? And if you want to be the first to know when I upload more videos about Disney, Shakespeare, Funko Pops, sometimes cats, make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't subscribed already. If you haven't subscribed already, it is scarily easy. All you have to do is click on my face. Thanks for joining me again today, everyone. My name is Halloween Matt, and I have 2 degrees, and that's the Teacup For One. Go away.